Good morning from the garden. It's the 27th of April, a very special day in the Netherlands because it's the day that we celebrate the King's birthday. That means everybody gets a day off, but because of the current corona crisis, people are asked not to celebrate in the usual manner, which is with flea markets in all the cities and other festivities. That is no problem for us because we usually spend this free day in the garden anyway. I have promised you a spring tour of our food forest, so that is what we'll be doing today. I want to take you around the plot and show you some of my favorite parts at the moment, but also some of the things that are not going so well. So let's start with some less good news, and that's the impact of the increasingly unpredictable weather on the garden. We had a very mild winter this year with hardly any frosts. But then in the second half of March, we had 2 weeks of frosts with the coldest day of the whole winter occurring on the 24th of March. It only got down to -6, but because by then a lot of the fruit trees were already flowering, which again is due to the mild conditions during the winter. It had a very severe impact on the fruit blossom. The two earliest flowering fruit trees in our garden are our apricot and peach. And growing these two trees, fruit trees in our climate is always a gamble, which is why through design we try to create a favorable microclimate. Part of it is the pond over here, because the large body of water is capable of storing warmth and then releasing it during the night when the temperatures drop. And our hope was that this would prevent frost damage of the blossom. However, this protection will work when the temperatures drop to maybe -1, -2 degrees, but the temperatures we got were around -6, and that was no longer enough to protect the fruit trees, and that means that unfortunately there will be no harvest this year. But because our plot is a 1/4 acre, that means we are able to plant many different fruit varieties, and that brings me to one of the most important principles of permaculture design, and that's diversity. Diversity is an insurance against failure. If I only had room for one tree, I would never plant an apricot or peach because the risk of failure is too high. But since we have the room to plant many different varieties, there will always be something that does well, no matter the circumstances. We have 2 varieties of plums, we have a cherry tree, and we have 3 or 4 varieties of pears, one of which is this one, Williams. And this one, even though it flowers only slightly later than the apricot and peach, was not damaged by frosts. And there are lots of little fruits setting already. The fruit setting is actually so good that I will be thinning the fruits later in order to get a better quality of fruits. We planted most of the fruit trees and large bushes in our garden in 2016, but we are taking our time with developing the herb layer because it is very important before we start planting it up to kill the weeds. The main problem here is couch grass. So before we start planting the herb layer, we cover the area with cardboard for a year, and we have a video on that. If you're interested, I'll link it in the description box. But in short, the way it works is taking away light will kill the plants over a long enough period of time. And we do this in strips. So every year we cover a certain area and the next year it can be planted up. And this year, this is the area that we're covering. And this is where this year we will be growing our winter squashes. This is the area of the garden that was covered with cardboard mulch last year. Now it's completely weed free. And we put down a layer of wood chips, and we'll be planting up the herb layer with a variety of plants that can support the health of the fruit trees. My favorite fruit is the apple, And we have no less than 9 different varieties of apples in our garden, because apples are, in our climate at least, the fruit that can be stored the longest. It has an amazing variety in taste and appearance, and also ways of use. Along the west side of the plot we have 6 varieties on a dwarfing rootstock. The one over here is probably the most beautiful one. It's a red Love Calypso. It's a very ornamental one actually, with the dark colored leaves and the dark pink blossom. But we have several different varieties behind that, and you can see they're flowering now, but there's also a difference in the flowering times even among apples. Most apples are not self-pollinating, which means that you need a variety that will pollinate your tree. Apples are divided into 6 flowering groups, and normally the apples in one group can pollinate the apples that are flowering in the same time, or the 2 adjacent groups. Because we have 9 varieties in total, and there are more apple varieties in the surrounding gardens, pollination is not a problem. But if you only can plant 1 or 2 trees, you really have to think about pollination. The apples are interplanted with low fruit bushes. We have, for example, black currant over there and other varieties of currant, but we have also some that, at least in our climate, are not common. And the most exciting one at the moment is this Salman Berry. You can see that the bush has also sustained some frost damage, but it's growing again, and it's even flowering for the first time. The flowers are really spectacular. The Latin name of this plant is Rubus spectabilis, and I assume it's because of the blossom. So hopefully this year for the first time we'll be able to taste the berries too. If you know salmon berries, if you grow them or can forage for them in the wild, please let me know what you think of the fruit. Like I said, we also have different varieties of currants or gooseberries, and those are native in our climate and much less susceptible to frost damage. So those are the bushes that I would choose if I had less space for growing. I would then go for a fruit that is much more reliable. Another very reliable berry for our climate is the honeyberry or huskap. And we have 5 different varieties over here with different flowering times and little different fruiting times. But even though honeyberries flower very early, their blossom is not susceptible to frost damage, so it does not really matter. And they are also extremely early fruiting. There are even already berries on the bushes. If you want to know more about growing huskap or honeyberries, we filmed a video on this topic last year, and I will link to it in the description box below, and you'll find all the information you'll need. Huskap berries are, as I said, very early ripening. Actually, they are the 2nd earliest ripening fruit in our garden. But now let's have a look at the 1st earliest ripening fruit that we have. The earliest ripening berry in our garden is the silverberry, and it's already ripe now, which is at the end of April. And even though, maybe you can see, this bush too has sustained some frost damage, and there are lots of berries, the most we have ever had, that we can harvest now. The silverberry is, in my opinion, one of the best bushes for the food forest. Not only because the fruits ripen so early, but also because it is a nitrogen fixer. We have also filmed a video about silverberries, so if you want to know more about these useful plants, check out the link in the description box. In our latest video, I talked about the different perennial vegetables that we're growing in the herb layer of our garden. And several people ask whether we're not growing artichokes, because I have not mentioned those. Well, actually we do grow artichokes, but because Usually they don't survive the winter. I don't really consider them a perennial plant in our climate. However, the bonus of the very mild winter we've had is that all our plants this year have survived. So we're looking forward to a great harvest of one of our favorite veggies. Many edible plants also have great ornamental value, and I want to show you one of the best examples and the star of the moment, and that's this Snowbell tree. It is actually in the Netherlands usually planted in parks or in public areas as an ornamental, and very few people are aware that it also produces edible fruits. I will show you those when they ripen later in the season in June, but for now we're enjoying the spectacular blossom. I want to finish today's video by showing you my favorite area of the garden at the moment, which is this spot under and around our plum tree with different fruit bushes and a very diverse herb layer. In the herb layer we have edible plants, but also plants with other functions like attracting beneficial insects. And I think as a whole this is a really great example of the food forest planting in a small area. In a future video I want to go into greater detail about all the plants that we have here and what their functions are. So stay tuned for that, subscribe and hit the notification button if you don't want to miss it. I hope you enjoyed today's tour of our food forest in spring. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up and I'll see you again soon. Happy gardening!